Welcome to Latter Daily Digest. We are a show that hopefully covers a variety of topics, but we do want to honor content creators in this kind of Mormon, ex-Mormon, nuanced Mormon, about Mormonism space. And so we have with us a content creator that for some is very well known, and we can talk about why. But welcome to Peter Bleakley of Mormon Civil War. And Peter is so kind to visit us or join us from across the pond, I guess is the phrase. He's over in the UK. And go ahead, Peter. Let's, I guess, what do you think you are most well known for? We might have different answers, but
Oh,
I'm curious what you would say for that.
yeah. I want to be most well known for saying masturbation in an LDS context on daytime news television in Britain.
Right.
That's kind of one of my great moments. But mostly it's about being, I guess, what am I? I don't know. People need to tell me what I'm known for, but I'm a social media complete harlot, so I'll go on anything anyone asks me to go on. And I kind of began with commenting a lot online in Facebook groups on other people's stuff and joining the conversation. And that has all escalated over time to being invited onto things and then developing the confidence to start a podcast myself. So it's
And
kind
then
of about
invited
my
to
my
a
position.
membership council.
Yes, well, there
Yeah.
as a direct consequence. So, I guess I'm a voice that was from the inside, wanting reform in the church. I want to be, in a sense, a spokesperson along with the other British podcasters for the international church, for the fact that, the world of Mormonism doesn't revolve around Utah. Obviously, that's where a lot of the thinking gets done that is then imposed on us. But this is a global church. It's been a global church for centuries, and we often feel forgotten or neglected, or definitely our culture, our interests, our political reality rarely features, if at all, in the rhetoric that you get from church members and from general authorities. So I think there's
Can I
been
jump
quite a
in?
movement of people.
Oh, I
Yeah,
just want
go
to say,
on.
I think I see that in the post Mormon space as well. It is pretty dominated by
Yes.
people in Utah, and
Yeah,
so yeah. So
very
I think
much.
on both sides of the
So
coin,
what's
you're
been
an important voice.
what's been really exciting is almost spontaneously, at kind of the same time I did, Nemo the Mormon, the 21st Century Saints, Priesthood Dispatches at the time, Sunstone UK, all kind of just a handful of individuals really, kind of representing a worldview, stepped up at roughly the same time to start being a voice on the airwaves for the Mormon experience here. And we've really created a space for ourselves. Nemo is now a regular employee and co-host with Mormon Stories, which is fantastic, as well as having his own very strong channel with a very large audience. And 21st Century Saints, each of us have kind of got a specialism. They've done amazing work looking at things from their point of view as women in
Safeguarding.
Scotland and now across the
Yeah,
country. Huge victories regarding changing policy for safeguarding in the church here in Britain. Priesthood Dispatches, bringing the fun, very powerful personal experiences, really great interviews, but of more of a sort of also with the sense of humour, which is very British. So it's been an absolute joy, and creating the community around Sunstone UK, which the has been going on. It's all helped. So I think very much this has been uh, I hope an example for other people in other countries to step up if you want to, because we're not special. We're just ordinary people who decided to create a podcast and get on with it and join in the conversation. So it's been really good to see these developments happen and to show, we hope, the American Mormon world. There's a lot more of us out here. You've met a lot of us, in online and also on your mission and so on. Um, and
And we'll provide
we
links
it's
to
kind
all
of
the.
we're here, that yeah, that'd be great. But this is an international church, and what's kind of frustrating is so many Latter-day Saints have come and lived with us for 2 years as missionaries. and we go to their countries. I went to America on mine. But we then feel kind of forgotten that particularly in the modern age where there's been such a culture war politicization of a lot of the rhetoric around Mormonism and what its priorities as an institution have been. And we're just sitting across the pond, sort of like, those aren't our issues. That language is alien to us. What's happened? That's not the gospel you taught us. Um, and also dealing with the fact that we're the first to suffer when things go wrong, that the church is disappearing very rapidly internationally. Here in Europe, we are down to
Right.
about 11% active and falling. Literally, the church will functionally cease to exist here very soon, in the next few years. So we have an urgency, and it's the same in lots of other areas, in Asia, in Japan, in all over the place. The same sort of
California.
collapse is happening, and it's
Yeah.
now starting to and it's now hitting America, but it's quite recently that's happened. We've been saying for 5 years, or I certainly have, it's already happening.
Yeah.
And we were saying it will come to you. I use this metaphor of like a tsunami or a tidal wave coming across the Atlantic. And it is now, which in a way is kind of exciting, because it's like, oh, at last they'll believe us, including
Right. It's
the critics of the church.
you're
So
like the
it's about
carrot, the
being that
canary in the coal
voice.
mine is the phrase.
Yes, exactly. We're a warning to everyone else. This is coming for you.
But the church has just been
So
ignoring
listen,
it and just
this is
walking
what it
around
feels
with
like.
the canary.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And or their solution is like we had a British rescue, a couple of years ago, where they sent 3 apostles who used to serve as missionaries here. So that was Ballard, Holland, and Cook. And but as usual, they brought nothing of substance, no solutions. All they did was reminisce about their missions, talk about their history, read us big chunks of, they're all descendants from great people. So Cookie was reading from Heber C. Kimball's journal and so on. And
Right.
and it's this
You
arrogance, the
guys did a
idea
great
that, oh,
commentary
we're
on
the
that.
apostles. You should just be grateful we're here, and that will revive the whole country. It's like you've given us zero whatsoever of any use that speaks to any of our needs, and you clearly don't understand what's happening here. So it's and then they go and they think problem solved. So it's really
I wanna
trying
just
to
jump
speak
in
up
and
and say
kind
to the
of
rest of the community, there's stuff going on here globally. Your church is disappearing and we're drowning. Are you going to notice that we're drowning? You spent 2 years converting us and nurturing us and serving in our congregations. It's all coming to nothing. Do you care? And
That's
so
right.
it's
And
quite a
people
big
can learn,
challenge in a
actually,
way to the heartland. Yeah.
people will be able to learn all about it by listening to your 4,000 hours worth of content that we're going to share links to.
Well,
Yeah.
But we
yeah,
want to
so I
hear
just
your
wanna
story.
jump in and I just wanna jump in and
Yeah,
synthesize
sure.
something real quick, and that is that I
Mm,
guess this is a unique point of view or point where your voice comes in because like you said, you came in, of course, obviously before the excommunication because it was your,
mm,
activities that eventually led to it, but you came in and still are, I would say, a voice of concern and care, so I think it's a unique take on the
mm,
outside of more you are considered a critic and now an apostate, but
mm.
at the
Yeah.
heart of it, you are upset. This is always what stood out to me the most about you when I first learned who you were as a believer. I wasn't interested in you at first because at this point I was feeling tired of believers and apologists is kind of how I saw them coming in and just not being willing to say the things that need to be said. So the first time I did actually hear you speak and you said the things that needed to be said as a believer, I was astonished. And especially how you would address or talk about leadership in the church, which even though I was already disenfranchised and disaffected, I I think there was still something inside of me where I would not be able to talk about these men as frankly as you did as a believer.
Mm.
But again, I think it is out of a place of care and concern, and so that's what I've appreciated about your voice. But yeah,
Well,
as
thank
we
you.
get into
That's
your
really kind.
content, yeah, you
Mm,
let's talk about. I guess maybe the I want to know where you got the title from and how you decided to kind of
yeah.
synthesize the Civil War aspect as the focus of your.
And maybe we can
Mm,
just have you give like a 3-minute little story of your
Oh
Mormon
yeah.
journey,
Where did it all begin?
leading up to
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
point
So
of deciding to do a
yeah.
podcast?
So absolutely, I'm still active. I was at church this morning, and I'm there and present, which is quite unusual, really, for people this far down the line, as it were, in this space. And I'll get to why in a bit. Yeah. So I started off born to British parents who went to BYU. So my mum was a recent convert from sort of nominal Catholicism. My dad was already a third generation member of the church, which is really rare in Britain, and they went to BYU in the late 60s, early 70s, to do their degrees. And
You're a
all the
BYU baby,
British,
aren't
I'm a BYU baby. I was born in Provo, so they got
Dual,
married at the Salt Lake Temple,
dual
had
citizenship.
me, and came back home to Britain. Yes, I do. Yep, I got keep up my American passport. Um, there, yeah, which can be problematic because it's only Ethiopia, I think, and the USA that tax you if you live somewhere else. And so I've checked. I'm not earning enough to have to pay taxes. Thank you, IRS. Um, but I've got so dual citizenship, and that's always been a kind of weird double world to live in. So I've grown up in Britain, in a very American church in a context of sort of Englishness, with British parents. My dad's from Northern Ireland, my mum from London, and um, and in that sense already an outsider, but also actually being born in this country I never went back to. I didn't go back to we weren't that wealthy. I never went back to the USA until my mission. That was the first time I'd gone back, so it was always this weird, almost alternate reality that I'm from that place, but I'm obviously really English, and here I am. So my mission was a joy to kind of reconnect with that and to explore that side of myself, I guess. So I grew up in Britain. My parents spent a bit of time in Northern Ireland then, and I've stayed really close to my roots. So I live in the southeast of England, in what is now Canterbury Stake, was Maidstone Stake, and um, my parents kind of walked into this tiny little Tunbridge Wells branch meeting in a community hall, um, and said, "Oh, hello, we're from just kind of come from BYU." And someone said, "Oh, good, we need a new branch president." My dad was branch president within weeks. Later on, the district presidency. My mum served in a lot of quite senior callings. She was just constantly either ward or stake, Relief Society president or primary president. My dad served as branch president and then bishop. Um, so I kind of grew up in this Mormonism that was certainly in the mission field, as the Utah people would call it, that was where we're building this thing from scratch, where we are coping with being persecuted and discriminated against in at least intellectually, seen as a mad cult from abroad, and not, very alien to British culture and feeling like outsiders, with a lot of anti-Mormon propaganda. So there can be, there is a long legacy of trauma that a lot of podcasters have talked about, of past persecution that still carries on today, even though the church really isn't persecuted in most of the world and hasn't been for a long time. But we were very much aware of that and experiencing it and
And
misunderstanding.
also,
And so really
Peter,
trying to
was
change the narrative. Yeah.
there also kind of a resentment from the English citizens that the Utah church had taken some of its uh, citizens?
No,
That
that was actually
wasn't an
ancient
issue.
history. There was
Okay.
no, there was a sense of in the past, they came and took our women or something. It's more about being worried about being kidnapped for polygamy, which weren't unfounded fears. That one of the Sherlock Holmes stories is about that.
The
So
very
there
first
was that
one.
hangover in the culture. Yes, yeah, but no one was conscious of that history, and it was a very tiny blip in British history that a few thousand people joined the church in the 1800s and went. In a way, we were starting over. As soon as the church went public about polygamy, the machine of conversion in Britain just flatlined. That was it. All the propaganda turned out to be true. Um, And up to the early 20th century, converts nearly always moved to America. They were called to Zion still. So by the 1970s, we were starting over. We were building from scratch, but we were doing really well. We were growing steadily and exponentially. We were one of the fastest growing religions in the country. Not by huge numbers, because the rest of the country was losing its religion and had been for decades. Um, but we were getting there. So in my childhood, I lived through that transition from branch to stake to having organized youth programs to having seminary. And my generation were the first wave to have that really all together and a great experience. Fantastic youth in the church. As long as you weren't gay or rebellious or telling your bishop too much about your sexual proclivities. Otherwise,
And
you
did you
got
go to the
treated brutally.
conventions?
Absolutely. So yeah, it was fantastic. We had great young single adult conventions and youth conventions. We're as a young adult, we had a complete social life provided by the church, that's really missing now, which is a real shame. And a lot of people in my generation lament the loss of that. And really it now appears we caught this golden age of kind of the last decade before the internet came and blew everything up, where we had established programs, where we had a great social life, where we'd got over the racism. I got baptized the year after they ended the racist segregation. So my teenage years and young adulthood were in this amazing sweet spot where we had it all going on. We could be completely confident in who we were. We were clearly better than the other churches. We had much better youth programs. We had the truth. All the narratives were being told about the history. Joseph Smith, this amazing innocent avatar of all humans in their religious quest, went on missions, told everyone about this. It was great. It was such a, so proud to be a church member and loving it and up for, building this kingdom.
And you came
Um,
back from your mission
so
and you
yeah.
wanted to do your part, right? So you found a mate and you were all ready
Oh,
to
absolutely.
have lots of
Yeah.
kids.
Well, I was always a bit skeptical of the off the plane, up the aisle approach to marriage straight after mission. It's completely unrealistic outside of the Utah economy. You cannot afford to do that. If you're going to be responsible, things are way too expensive in the rest of the world, and you can't just take on 3 jobs and raise 4 children. That's not real, in the way that a lot of my friends ended up trying to, at least at BYU. Our economy and everything is not geared towards making that possible. So I grew up. I think the advantage for me, growing up with the culture in my family, which I didn't realize was unique at the time, was both having complete devotion and faith. My parents served and served and served, and along with others of their generation, they built this church from scratch, but also a sense of constant critical evaluation. And at a time where you had 24-hour church with people come home for lunch and then go back in the evening on Sunday, our lunchtime Sunday conversations were often amazing because we had all the guests, that come to lunch. We'd have the visiting high counselor, the stake president, the people, and the conversations were brilliant. And nearly always the conversation, even just with my parents, was, okay, today was a disaster. These things went wrong. Those people were hurt. That was nonsense that got taught. What are we going to do about it? How do we take responsibility to fix this thing? And that is just the normal culture I grew up with, which was incredibly healthy because it was saying, we love this church, we want it to work, but we understand it's not perfect. We're not expecting it to be perfect. It's up to us to make it better. And that really is why I'm still active now, because I wasn't ever in a world where it was just blind trust, like so many people had, that these leaders are infallible and nothing should go wrong. Because as soon as you find something's wrong, it blows up that illusion. I never really had that illusion. It was always about, be real about what's going on, discuss it, we can make things better. And being on that journey, which matches Mormon theology. Mormon theology is about a growth mindset, about progression and improvement, and learn from the mistakes and do better next time. And that's
And
meant to be the point of continuing revelation. So
And
that
I
was
know,
my whole
Peter,
mindset while I was, all in, as it were. Yeah.
you served in bishoprics, and did you continue that and offer ways to help make your ward better?
Yes. Yeah, so here where we have very small manpower, I've lost track of the callings I had. Sometimes you'd have three at once. So I've done everything. I've been ward mission young men's president. I've been a mission leader in 3 wards. I was ward clerk. That's as high as I got in the ranks, in a sense, in a bishopric in 2 wards. Um, I've been a stake youth leader, I think, if I remember right. It seems bonkers not to remember clearly, but it's just been one thing after another in 50 years or whatever. Um, and, teaching gospel doctrine a lot, teaching youth Sunday school, teaching primary. So I've done kind of every job there is below being in the top bit of a bishopric. Um, and which gives you wide experience, and it also means in congregations like ours out in the world, you have much more of a variety of personality types and career types in leadership, because you can't be fussy. You don't just get the generic middle-aged lawyer or businessman that you get in a typical Utah ward, because they've got so many to choose from. You get a much more diverse group of people with different opinions and personality types, and some of them can be quite maverick. So we tend, I think, to have more forward thinking and healthier leadership. And that hasn't been the case in every part of the country. There have been some areas that have just had the worst stake presidents who have come from entitled families who think they're the aristocracy and just alienated everyone. But certainly here in the Southeast, my experience has very much been that nearly all of my leaders have just been extraordinary people, male and female, forward thinking, sensible, reasonable, kind, trying to do the right things.
So
And in a sense who I trust, and I think that's easier where you're away from the Utah culture. There's no
yeah.
social advantage for being a church leader here. You only do it if you mean it. You are only coming to this church if you really believe it, unless your parents are really dragging you there. Um, your leaders, the religion we have is, in a sense, the pure religion. It's nothing to do with history and culture and politics, and you need to stay active so that you don't lose your job, which is the kind of pressure that comes in the Morador in Arizona and Utah and Idaho.
Mhm.
Um, so in a way, we got
So
privileged
where
to
do
grow
things
up with
start
this kind
to
of more
change for you
sincere and
then?
pure version. Yeah.
Oh,
So I went
sorry.
on
Let me say that
I was,
again.
yeah, go on. No, go on.
Because I don't know, sometimes
No,
there
it
overlap.
did
So
change.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
No,
somewhere
so
you
I
it
served
seems
a
like you had
mission
really
in the
idealized. I'm so sorry. Go
big time. Absolutely. And all my experience of what was going on was backing up that ideal perception, with the caveat of knowing we're not perfect. But I had no reason not to trust the narrative about the church's history I've been taught. I had no reason to distrust the leadership. I think I'd excuse some of their foibles or disconnection from what seemed relevant as just a bit, well, that's Americans for you. It's very convenient to have a sort of, well, poor Americans. They're a bit immature. They're an underdeveloped cultural country. They're naive. They're ditzy. They do these really cheesy adverts on everything, and which is very un-British. It was completely alien to our culture, but I served my mission in Alabama and it all works there. I was like, yeah, this is where these things work. This is where these videos are made for. And we'd show a church video with every discussion. It totally worked. So we found the niche that it was for in the Florida Tallahassee mission. Had a brilliant time on mission, loved it. Everything was positive. I got involved in Christian Union at university. I converted God converted, but I was involved in the conversion of one of the Christian Union leaders to Mormonism, which was quite epic and very reassuring that we've got something that even a really lovely, humble, committed Christian. I thought, I've got nothing to teach this guy. He's better than I am, but still he found things in Mormonism. And what was most interesting is we spent a year or two mostly wading through anti-Mormon literature. He got hold of everything he could. This is all pre-internet still, really. And just by discussing that, he started to realize that Mormonism speaks to a lot of stuff that standard evangelical Christianity has very little to say about. And it gave it credibility, and it was an in to discuss heavy stuff, which he still loves. He's still active, bless him. Um, even though it's a great sacrifice for him joining the church, and his family reacted extremely negatively at first. But he was prepared to do that. So all of these are incredibly faith-affirming experiences that I had. But then I get what changed? Well, the internet came along, as so many people talk about, and we started to encounter information that kind of said, oh, actually, half of this stuff I was defending or saying was anti-Mormon lies in all these conversations with my friends and dialogues on my mission and so on was actually true. The Sears Stone stuff, Joseph Smith's treasure digging, all these things, the real history of the racism, the so many issues. It's hard in a sense to put yourself back in time, because after you spent years and years churning over these things, you kind of have to think, well, what was my actual triggers? And for me, particularly, the triggers were the same as for a lot of other people. Because I was sort of wasn't expecting much of the church. So the gospel topics essays and everything were fantastic, confirming the real history, and admitting the lies, which is terrible. But for me, the real triggers was the leaders started lying to our faces. And that's pretty major. And the fact that the internet then records this and you can fact check it, you can go and look at it. So I think
Right.
for me, the key moments apart were the November policy, but particularly Dallin Oaks and M. Russell Ballard in that face to face with the youth, where they said the church has never, that leaders have never hidden anything from anybody. And they held up the edition of the Improvement Era magazine from the
Mhm.
1970s, which had the article that was published about the different counts of the first vision as proof of this. When, if you know the backstory, the only reason that ever got written was because Joseph Fielding Smith, church historian for decades and an apostle, had hidden the 1832 account in a safe, had perhaps foolishly mentioned this to a general authority who later mentioned it to a journalist. That then got talked about, and this put pressure on the church to suddenly, oh, look, we've just found this 18.2 account of the first vision. Give it to a scholar at BYU to write up. Then they kind of buried it. So that person took their research to the Tanners, the anti-Mormons. They published it, and then this article happened. So I was looking at, and it was such a microcosm of so many bigger issues. Here I'm seeing apostles lying. If they were to believe, they are completely ignorant of the history of their own religion, and someone just told them a half-baked story and said, this will be a great visual aid to use this evening. Here it is, hold this magazine, without telling them the backstory. I'm assuming they probably know the backstory, but who knows? So you've now got this idea of, well, these people are really not in charge of the church, are they? Who is running this church? Who actually manages the apostles? Because they are inept as heck when we're watching them live with real, even faked and prepared dialogue. They screw up over and
Mhm.
over again in these face-to-faces and reveal their true nature. But to then just lie, to say, we know from the beginning of time. And I think for me, the extra level of disappointment and crushing horror from that was it was M. Russell Ballard himself who a year earlier had addressed the church education system staff and taught the opposite. He'd said, we've got to stop telling faith-promoting stories. We must teach the real history here at church. We've got to inoculate the members, which I've been saying for years, particularly after this experience of going through all the anti-Mormon literature at university. It's like, why are we not using the good years where we're not being persecuted to inform our members about all this stuff? Because this is all ticking time bombs waiting to go off. And the
Yeah.
church is acting like we're still under persecution, which we weren't. It's like, we can relax now. We can put down our defenses. Let's look at ourselves for a bit and admit our problems and re-educate the membership. Because when it kicks off again, they will be completely defenseless against this information. And I was
I
getting,
think the
in a
church was
sense, an
able
early
to, maybe
exposure
they
to that
felt like,
information from the anti-Mormon literature. Yeah,
yeah. I
go on.
wonder if they felt like it only seemed like a few people here and there. So even though they knew it was a ticking time bomb, just the it just seemed to be picking off a few people. Overall, they were able to hold it. I wonder if they'd
Yeah,
never
yeah.
thought that it could really, like you said, like the tidal wave or
Well,
avalanche really pick
yeah.
up.
They were completely unprepared for the internet, weren't they? When everyone at the click get it all. So for me, this was in this one moment, that major dysfunction in how the church had chosen all my life to lie to everyone about the true narrative had the information. I was seeing, Fair Mormon was just starting out. I was a big fan. My mum was a fan. It was so thrilling to see some members actually doing what the general authorities have been failing to do all this time,
Scholarship.
and take responsibility to respond to the critics of the church, to actually be apologists and engage in the debate. And it's like, hurrah, here are our heroes. And all I had to help with this deluge of anti-Mormon literature was The Truth About the God Makers book, which was quite good at refuting by documentation the accusations in the God Makers movie, which is an extreme anti-Mormon thing with lots of blatantly, obviously inaccurate nonsense in it. And also a book called Are Mormons Christians by a Christian minister who'd converted, that was quite helpful for this dialogue I was having with Steve as well. But that's all I had to go on. Um, and so I was cheering from the rafters when Ballard said everything that I'd learnt from my own experience would be essential for the church to maintain its credibility. We must hear it at church, not in the anti-Mormon books. Tell the truth at church. You've got you've got to educate these people, or they're going to have no idea what hit them when this all comes out. And stop with the telling people to just trust feelings. He was saying, give them the cold, hard information, give them informed answers in this amazing talk about the challenges of CES in the 21st century, or whatever he called that talk. But then to watch him a year later do everything he had told the CES not to, the hypocrite. He sat there telling people not to believe this stuff. He told faith-promoting stories. He told nonsense that you should just trust the leaders with blind faith. Whereas the key point to inoculate people is they have to accept that our leaders have made many mistakes. Is there a way we can still have them still, in a sense, be the conduit of some truth from God? That's
And
the
they've never
challenge the
hidden
church
anything,
faces.
as
How do
far
you
as he
reckon?
knows.
And we've never hidden anything. And the whole point was to admit they did. And so it was, and my poor parents, because I got this up on the laptop. I was visiting them at home, and I was so angry about this, and I was showing them, and it's only a short clip, but I kept stopping it every 10 seconds to have a rant. It's like, and then he said this, look, can't you get it? And my dad was like, will you just let us listen to it through? I was so angry. So that was a turning point. And then the policy of exclusion, which went after the children, which in its original form
In
actually
2015.
said that, yeah, in November 2015, that said the that if you have a parent who is cohabiting in a same-sex relationship, or has, including past tense, which could mean even before they were baptized, that those children were going to be, and teenagers up to the age of 18, would be banned from all priesthood blessings and ordinances, including a baby blessing. Babies would not be allowed to be baptized, couldn't go to the temple. And the condition for them even being baptized was they had to become legal adults, like 18 years old, move out of the house of their parent, officially kind of denounce their parents' relationship, in a sense, sign an affidavit in front of the state president, and then make an appeal to the first presidency for permission to be baptized. It was horrific. And at that point, obviously, loads of people had a huge shock and have never recovered from that, and a lot left. Um, and you realize these people don't even understand the basics of what Jesus has taught about children. How is that possible? Because
Was
this church taught me
unchristian of
that
them.
stuff in the first place. It was
Unchristian.
it was inhuman. and so stupid and so ineptly worded, and then and clearly not thinking through the actual real life consequences, claiming it's to protect the children when it's clearly shunning them and humiliating them at church every Sunday. Oh, we're going to talk over and over again about the Holy Ghost, how much you must have the Holy Ghost as a teenager to help you through your life, and the gift of the Holy Ghost. Oh, unless you've got a gay parent, in which case it really doesn't matter. No harm will be done to you. That doesn't work, and the stupid interview that Christopherson did with President Newsroom at the time, Mike Otterson, the English guy, which is
And
toe-curlingly embarrassing to watch.
and President Nelson,
And
as an
I
apostle,
think,
claimed that it
yeah.
was by
Oh, double
revelation.
claims, absolutely. Yes, doubling down. I mean, we now know President Monson probably had nothing to do with it. He was in dementia. It was probably Nelson that pushed this thing through, and all that's come out later about it. But then again, more of the same, that Nelson himself then abandoned it, claims to have been pleading with God because of all the harm it did. It's like, anyone with basic common sense could have seen all that harm coming, mate. Why didn't you? And now you're pretending in somehow you're the great savior rescuer from your own policy. So all of that just absolutely crashed any kind of credibility that the apostles might have had. And it also broke all the rules. And I think another turning point really was the same for Cara Burrell, the Nuance, where she was listening to she's described it vividly, listening to conference. She had been very involved in the I'm a Mormon campaign. My bishop was, he was in one of the movies. We'd smothered our train stations in London with I'm a Mormon and
Right.
all that, and half my friends are up there in these pictures. And then Nelson gets up and throws everyone under the bus, saying it was a victory for Satan. And then he blamed us. We showed ingratitude for Christ's atonement by ever going with this thing in the church where we're meant to obey unconditionally the apostles because they're the mouthpieces of God. What did he want
And
us to do? Say no to 2 successive prophets? Yet he wants
and
us to obey him. It
and
was
Christ was
madness.
offended, even though in a prior conference, we learned that you
No,
cannot
it said
be
that it's a
offended.
choice to be offended.
We have a choice.
It was, I mean, it was a car crash of stupidity. And, Hinckley is no innocent angel. We are now finding out more and more. But Hinckley and Monson at least had people skills. They had sense of humor. They could do self-deprecating humor, which to the British particularly is a very important quality. You have to be able to laugh at yourself if you're an authority figure. Otherwise, you are just going to be hated and no one will have any respect for you. We don't like people who are too pompous. And I kind of warned at the time, the next two in line, Nelson and Oakes, are clearly not like that. They are not cute. They're not cuddly. They're very doctrinaire, very harsh, and it was obvious the church was going to really struggle under their leadership, and they went for it straight away.
And we
So
were thinking that
the narrative of civil war.
they were almost like
Go on.
Pharisees.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I think the other thing is that it was such an obvious example with the November policy to do the literal opposite to what Jesus taught. So I kind of had this turning point to start speaking up when um these thoughts have been sort of brewing, and I was asked to give a talk one summer. We were down in Cornwall in the southwest of England visiting my sister in Helston Ward there, and I was asked to me and my mum were asked to give talks and to be the main speakers on a Sunday because they made the most of having visitors who were capable of giving talks. Um, and this ward had already been brutalized by this car crash with the new history because their bishop, Steve Bloor, in I think the 7th year of his tenure, had come across the stuff that had been hidden from him about church history, like Joseph Smith being polygamous, and he'd lost his testimony and got rapidly excommunicated while serving as a bishop. And it had had obviously a huge impact on that ward. This lovely, sleepy, very faithful, beautiful, doing loads of charity work, even internationally, this amazing congregation had just been blown up by by the church, encountering the losing its own bishop. because of the lies that have been told about the history, and then discovering the truth online. And none of them have been prepared for it. So I was walking into a minefield and perhaps was a bit too cavalier in how we approached this. So my mum's gave a lovely talk quoting Uchtdorf, something to do with her major theme often was how do we integrate the ideal and the real? We have our ideals, but how do we help our real lived experience match those religious ideals? And then I followed up with actually quite a blunt thing about Christians versus Pharisees, about the danger is not the enemies of the church from outside, but do we slip into becoming like the Pharisees that Jesus criticized? And at the time, I kind of had a list of things that the Pharisees had been criticized by Jesus for, um, and how we've started doing them. And particularly, I was a bit assertive about for the strength of youth was starting to happen. We're starting to have these conventions imported from America that with the FSY brand. And we got to that much earlier than you guys. I think what was the American version called initially? That was kind of a private enterprise, not for the strength of youth. It was
ESY, especially for youth.
EFY, especially for youth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like an in-house clone of that, and they had these posters up everywhere of the dress code for FSY to go to as a teenager. And it's like, are you ready? In a sense, are you worthy because you got the right haircut, the right length sleeves? And it was all, and the values of that were American Utah middle class clothing code and culture. I'm like, what's that got to do with the gospel? Our youth conventions, you could just turn up as you were. As long as you weren't naked, you could bring your non-member friends, and it was an amazing missionary tool. And so I actually had one of the posters, and I kind of almost tore it up at the pulpit and just threw it. And I thought that's what I'd be in trouble for, because that was quite an act, It's kind of like this is wrong. This is Phariseeism right here. Exactly what Jesus said.
That was a battle at
And
BYU Hawaii too. I feel like with the island
yeah,
culture really, really, really clashed with the white Utah culture, and especially at
yes,
Poverty is at Play. That not everybody had
yeah,
suits,
absolutely.
and so it
Yeah.
was a really odd juxtaposition sometimes.
And and it's still going on. The recent controversy about the black man with cornrows in his hair being disciplined at BYU Hawaii. The black menaces have been highlighting in their stuff. So it was, it's clearly racist for a start. And I'm a teacher by now. I teach teenagers at school. So I'm very defensive of teenagers being judged, persecuted, seen as the enemy, controlled in ludicrous ways, and also just how hard it is to keep a teenager active in the church. Why are we putting these obstacles up? Why are we we should just be grateful if they turn up at all. My gosh, and they would be now, we've lost so many. And they have finally changed their tune on all this. It's much more inclusive attitude now at FSY. But anyway, but for me, it's the first time I've spoken up about, and the reaction was kind of instant and terrifying. Straight after the sacrament meeting, this adorable little old lady kind of dragged me into the corridor, into the area with the coats where no one could see us. And she said, I loved your talk. You're way ahead of your time. You will never be asked to speak in this ward again. And off that went. So that was my first hint that I'd just blown stuff up,
And that actually reminds me when Maven went through the temple and some elderly lady went up to her and said,
"Oh yeah,
we used to fake slitting our throats."
It's like so
excited about it.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
oh
she
my
was smiling.
Gosh.
She's like, it's different.
Yeah,
I love
and there
the
are
truth
some
tellers.
really great. Yeah, there's some great pensioner rebels in that ward. They're just a hoot. But as the bishop reacted really badly, he just had a face like thunder. We kind of did a runner. I think we were heading straight back to the southeast. So it was like Dukes of Hazzard. We were kind of, was it the next day? I don't know. My wife's shaking her head at me. But anyway, we were heading for the border, on Bodmin Moor, which is like this wilderness, and you're it's like something from the Wild West.
Escaping with your lives.
And exactly, heading for the county border and to get out of Cornwall. And the bishop phoned me, and he was livid, and he'd already had to go at my sister and brother-in-law, I think. And he'd said, I don't know why you gave that talk. I'm so angry. If you were in my ward, I would take your temple recommend away, and it was all of that. And so I'm getting corrected. Go on, Lynn. What have I missed? Oh yeah, he asked for my spread. Yeah, no, he's quite. Yeah, he asked me for my stake president's contact details so he could phone him up and tell him to have my temple recommend removed.
Tattletales.
Um,
Wow.
and I'm like, wow, where's all that coming from? And then so okay, and it was all very tense there for a while afterwards. And really, it was nothing to do with me throwing the FSY paper on the floor. It was kind of the idea that I dare to criticize the leaders whatsoever seemed to be the thing, or imply
That's the
anything
real
is
sin.
wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that was I have these rare experiences, but they kind of mean so much, and it kind of these nutshell, all these factors coming into one moment. Um, Now here's why I've not just given up. A year later, we went back, kind of crept back into Helston Ward. This guy's still bishop. And we had a chat, and he was lovely. He was friendly. He basically repeated all the points I'd made. He said, yes, we need to have honest conversation and dialogue about our problems. He'd obviously reflected, maybe lived another year of running his ward and dealing with these things, and realized I maybe had a point. Um, and
And
it's
maybe the
been
elderly lady
gorgeous
came
ever
to him and
since.
said,
Yes,
hey,
yeah,
I love
exactly.
Peter's
Yeah,
talk.
yeah, yeah. I know. So, um, so that what that taught me is kind of what I know is people are teachable, and I'm very passionate about this from my profession as a teacher of teenagers at high school. I Truth prevails. It really does. I mean, it prevails where loads of members of the church are finding the truth and leaving because they find out how much they've been lied to and how much the church has been robbing from them, which is a whole other issue, and all the rest of it. Um, but people are teachable, and so this is why I bother. So, I in 2019, I was just starting to write these really long Facebook posts. Um, and they were going on and on and on. Love a bit of long form. And and then I thought, just where I'm just trying to be like, we are heading for disaster here. We've got people who are still in. We need to turn this around, but what's it going to take? What are the root causes here? Are there simple solutions to save this church? Because we are screwed. Our bishops are going apostate. We've got all this tension. There's culture war going on, you could say, between Christians and Pharisees, not the left and the right. And then I was like, this is a lot to read, isn't it? So what if I just read it and recorded it on my iPhone and added it as an audio file? So I did that. And
And then
at the time also, quite
you published
quickly,
your first one on
yes, so
January
these were
6th, 2021.
Oh my gosh, there you go. That was the first time it went on YouTube, but I was actually starting 2 years earlier in 2019 with
Okay.
writing, and then being just an audio podcast. So I got fast intervention, just really based on a few of my Facebook posts and my contributions to discussions in the Bloggernacle. I was invited by the Thoughtful Faith blog to write some articles for them. So I did 3 articles for them, one about the temple, one about that moment, the Ballard and Oakes lying and what a disgrace that was, and also about not buying into this doom end of times narrative, basically saying we can still grow this church, but we're going to have to make some changes to do it. So my whole shtick in a nutshell, really. I was then invited on to Gina Colvin's Thoughtful Faith podcast before what's his face stole her podcast name. And she's an amazing Maori woman from New Zealand who I think is now in Community of Christ, but she was one of the major sort of international voices for feminism, for the global church. And we had a wonderful discussion. And I was quite free and quite strong in my criticisms of the leaders, but it really got her in trouble. Her bishop did not cope with this at all. And I found out later, came very close to excommunicating her because of our conversation and other things. So I'm a bit of a bull in a china shop. I will just say things how they are, and she will too. And I think this is part of British culture compared to American. We don't tiptoe around things. If something's wrong, we'll say it. And our culture is to be quite ruthless and rude and use some swear words if we're talking about something that's wrong, or people who are a bit up themselves. Whereas America has this amazing, and particularly Mormon America has this passive aggressive culture that you speak to each other very politely and nicely, while with your eyes you're stabbing them in the face. Um, and the fact that you Brits just say the things out loud kind of really hurts those social norms, even in dissident communities. Um, so, so it's kind of, I think I can reveal the secret. So Gina set up this Facebook group for non-American Mormons, which was I can't remember its original name. She kind of changed it to something
Brilliant.
milder later when we finally let some Americans in. But it's like our secret club where we can just swear about the stupid Utards and the Americans and say what we felt without having to tiptoe, because otherwise even these post-Mormons would tell us off for being too blunt or rude or whatever. They just don't get our sense of humor, you know. So that was a hoot. So I started just recording these and putting them on my Facebook as an audio. Then somehow someone convinced me it's actually easy to do a podcast. So I started putting them out as an audio podcast. So not live films. Then John Dehlin intervened. So John wanted to do an interview with us, particularly after I got excommunicated. I mean, I can tell the story of that very quickly, that it was from these Facebook posts my stake president got very, very uncomfortable because I was overtly criticizing the brethren, which absolutely meets the criteria in the handbook for church discipline. You're not allowed to have any public opinions of your own at all. Otherwise, they can do whatever they want to you. And they've ramped up those things recently as well. Oh yeah, Radio Free Mormon had me on as well, sort of after hearing me on Gina Colvin. That was a wonderful conversation. He was an absolute hero of mine. I was so excited by this amazing podcast, Behind Enemy Lines. It was just brilliant. And the guy had a sense of humor, you know, it wasn't all serious Mormon stories stuff. And so brilliant, and what a lovely guy. And we spoke for ages afterwards as well. You know, he wasn't rushing things, and I really got a sense that we were kind of kindred spirits, that he still really felt very deeply about what this religion could be, you know, if it got things right. That was so clear then. He may be over that by now, but this is quite early days for him. um and that was a very strong sense. Yeah, we definitely kind of on the same wavelength. And you had Infants on Thrones as well doing brilliant satire. So there were some Americans stepping up to do what really appeals to a British and Commonwealth sense of humor. Um, so my stake president was I probably getting a lot of grief from other members of the stake. You know, what are you going to do about Peter? He keeps posting these things in my private Facebook group. You know, I'm not publishing things on the wall at church. So looking back, it was really outrageous. Um, and he was reading through it all. And then when it went into podcasts as audio, he kind of had this strange, I don't know why, like fixation with not actually listening to me saying the words. Probably because it would humanize me too much. So he'd only read it. But he
Hmm.
eventually he met with he kind to some extent he did due diligence. He'd come and meet with me, and I waffle on for hours, as you know. And he would listen. You know, he'd just forget the rest of church, and he sat in his office and listened to me while everyone else did sacrament meeting or whatever. And we talked things through,
Wow.
and he really was trying to understand, I think. I should have shut up more and just asked him some more questions. That was a strategic error. But I was still in the early days of this, like, no one here realizes that the house is burning down. You know, it's not a few small
Yeah.
issues. Your stake, President, is not going to be here in a few years. unless not we change our home teaching strategy locally,
Mhm.
unless we get rid of this leadership. I mean, that's big. How do we even make that happen? But ultimately, it's going to have to be something that major. Do you understand? You know, can you get real? Because, and he was a very new convert, actually. Lovely guy. I've huge respect for him. He's a person who's gone the extra unbelievably for our LGBTQ members. You know, I can't even tell the story, you know, it's all confidential stuff, but the guy's a hero for that. You know, maybe done a boo-boo with how he handled me, but remarkable. He initiated independently police background checks for everyone working with youth as our state policy. You know, which
That's
really
awesome.
paved the way for that for us being able to make that go global, because we could point to a precedent, and he was involved in the committees that then state ramps that up. So I'm in this real dilemma situation. In a way, this is the same as my relationship with that bishop in Helston. The people who can do the most awful things to you in the church can also be the heroes. They can be persuaded. They can
Mm.
get some things right. There is hope. There is enough good there that this church and these communities deserve to survive, but they are going to have to get their head around some really heavy stuff and make some radical changes, or it won't happen. So he eventually kind of sat me down and gave me the threat. The moment came, you know, you will need to take these things down and stop doing it, or I will be forced to proceed with church discipline. And the guidebook says that in that situation, the stake president should be coordinating with the area presidency. So he said he'd been having discussions with the area presidency, he'd been following due process. I don't think Strengthening Church Members Committee sent him a dossier. I never got a sense that he was being leaned on, but they didn't need to, because if he was reading my Facebook posts, it's all there. I'm not exactly hiding stuff.
Mm.
If you're in my private Facebook group, not a public forum. And so I keep re-emphasizing. Um, and so I said, well, that's not going to happen. All along, I'd known that if I persisted with this, it was highly likely I was going to get disciplined. John Dehlin had just been through his. Bill Reel, bless their hearts, it really helped me that they'd recorded theirs, so I knew what was involved and what to expect. And my intention, and Sam Young, who I was an advocate for, and with two others, we spoke for his petition on the news. That's when I was talking about wanking on the telly. And so that had been another moment of really putting my head above the parapet and being very public.
Mm.
And actually, the response was really positive on the whole from members of the church. I never heard anyone criticize me for doing that. It was very much, yeah, you're right. You know, this stuff needs sorting out. You know, there's a lot of goodwill there. Um, so, but it was still a moment. It was like my heart sank, and I was like, okay, I've thought about this conceptually, but this is it now. I'm actually going to be, in a sense, booted from this religion that's been my whole life, my whole culture. I'm, you know, how old was I then? Late 40s, early 50s. You know, I've reached this point. Obviously, I was never going to back down. That just wasn't on the table. But but I was from then on. It's like, well, it's going to be different. My turn. I'm not going to sit there and come out devastated. I'm not going to have a psychological collapse like these other poor people did for such a long time, because it was such a shock. Because they'd shared their experiences, it wasn't a shock. I knew what was coming, therefore I could strategize. So it was COVID year. So they just changed the rules that you could ex people or do these courts of love with just a bishopric or a stake presidency and not the High Council. But there was still the caveat that the member could request it. So I was like, I'm having the High Council, please, big audience. You know, I'm not going down without a fight. I'm not going to make this comfortable for you. You will. This is a public event, you know, as it had been for others. What you're doing, I represent a lot of people. Um, and COVID came, so we had to keep delaying it for months because we couldn't assemble that many people in a room until the lockdown rules changed. So towards the end of 2021, we finally got there. Um, and it was an amazing experience. I really wish, you know, it could have been recorded, because it was theatre. It would have been made a great stage play. Um,
I
but
would have loved to have been a fly on that wall.
I know. Oh my gosh, it was a hoot. And I've got a terrible memory, so I'm going to have to when we eventually tell this story, I'm going to have to rely on Lynn to kind of remember the details. But we had most of the High Council there. They didn't have a full High Council at the time, COVID stuff. But some of them were people I grew up with since I was a child. You know, this is family. This is genuinely a court of my peers. And the state president went into it very sincere. He genuinely wanted to explore all the possibilities, and he gave every single individual there the opportunity to say anything they wanted or to ask me any questions. So it was not a railroaded thing at all. I felt heard. I gave my speech. It was terrible. I screwed it up to. It was a bit of a Natasha Holfer scenario where you're so busy dealing with all the social media and thinking it through and making sure, in a sense, that it has maximum impact. You don't get time to sit down and write your scripts. So I garbled some stuff. I can't even remember what was in it, but made a few points. You know, he was mainly obsessed with the insulting language I'd used. So I was really surprised. At no point did he ever address any of the actual criticisms I'd made. He
The
just
substance.
trotted off. He trotted off. He'd gone again, reading hundreds of pages, kept emphasizing how he'd suffered reading all my stuff. I'm like, you could have listened to it. I did make it easier. And he just listed all the insulting terms I'd used here and there about general authorities. None of the hours of evidence justifying those judgments or the points. And it really was like I got X'd for tone policing because of tone policers, which I think is the funniest thing ever. Like, if I'm going to be excommunicated for something, that's quite punk, isn't it? That's really good.
Right. And we know there's far worse
but
that people have done that probably deserve excommunication that consistently do not. So it's really sad to see. Yeah.
Yeah. But
what
it was,
does earn
and
it.
I was kind of surprised to still be X'd because, you know, and what I'd done is I'd long beforehand, particularly as I had this delay because of COVID, I'd sent links to all the High Council members I could get contact details for to my podcast. I'd explained the situation, what I was doing, why I was doing it, what my concerns were. So actually, a lot of them had been listening to it before the trial. And almost every one of them said, we know, Peter, we have no doubt about your testimony of Jesus Christ and your love for this church, you know, and some of them said, I agree with, you know, pretty much everything you're saying in the podcast. So it was kind of a love-in. It was really friendly in that way. And in a way, it was more the state presidency who looked most sort of cross and grumpy and had the hardest questions. Um, and I'll tell, you know, if I can remember it all and write it down with Lynn, I'll go into details on the rest of the dialogue at some point. But we then went for a meal after quite a long encounter and came back later, and they were still talking. I don't know if they then had a state council meeting, but you know, I know
Is that when you wore your
that they
hat?
approached it as yes. So I've forgotten the hat. So I was
I've
like,
got it here.
I've got to take. So I was to Lynn like, oh, I've got to have an outfit for this. I'm going to turn up spectacular. I want a big flouncy red sequin cape with feathers on and all of that. And I want a hat with a letter A for apostasy, like the scarlet letter and a question mark.
Not adultery, but
Lynn,
apostasy.
yeah, exactly. So Lynn was like, you can't have a cape, but I'll make you a hat. So she got busy and we went to Hobbycraft and bought loads of stuff or Dunelm Milne, I think we ended up finding it. So yeah, we raided their stationery department
Brilliant.
and she got a bit creative with it. So we went in and it was so weird because I have church every day in this room, every Sunday in this room. I walked into the chapel, they had the big U shape with everyone there, everyone's very formal and stands up. You deposit your phone with the bishop in the basket in the foyer, and because they were very, you know, I had to sign the document committing that I wouldn't be recording it. And everyone was very friendly and formal and so on. And so I sort of put it on for a bit and said, you know, the covenants you're about to take from me were made in an interesting costume with the cool hats. So I thought I'd bring something appropriate for probably losing them all. And then just sat it on the table next to me and off we went. And they, you know, it was an icebreaker. So excommunicated, right? Okay. In a sense, there was no shock because I've been prepared for it by my friends. Oh, yeah. So the language now is so Big Brother. It's hysterical. It's you have a membership council, and the outcome of it can be either membership restrictions, you know, the old disfellowship, or membership withdrawal, like it's a golf club, you know. Even though it's and Lynn spoke as my sidekick, and she talked about how what they were planning to do would be taking away her covenants as well, taking away her temple marriage, and that she understood and respected my integrity and what I was doing. So that was really lovely and powerful of her. But then you kind of get this second go, because in your letter, of excommunication, it says that you can
There's an
appeal
appeal
to the first
process.
presidency. Yeah. So I was like, cool. So I wrote my appeal letter. I thought I'd go easy on them, so it's only 26 pages long, and send that off to the first presidency. And I read that as an episode of my podcast. By this time, I'm very close to filming. We'll get to that in a minute. And so I was like, I know the first presidency are probably never going to see this, but whatever secretary or minion they delegate this to is going to have an interesting time. You know, I'm going to make it entertaining for them. So that happened. And then the state president got the verdict letter, and he sat down with me and, you know, read the letter to me, but didn't give it to me. I should have asked for a copy. I've just got too busy. I forgot to ask for one later. What I should have done is snatch it from his hand and run out of the building, because what the hell can
Yeah,
they even
you
do
wouldn't have
about
gotten a
that?
copy is,
You know?
what I understand.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. So what I
They
just
can't
said, oh, can I
excommunicate
see
you
that? Oh,
twice.
how interesting. Yeah, bye. Yes, yeah. So, but I like that because it, you know, it's them. The buck stops with the first presidency. This is what it's about. This is who I'm criticizing, not my state president, who's adorable. It's about them. So in a way, that was quite satisfying. That, again, who knows if they heard it, but there was a process and I followed it. And this is something that Nemo's done, where he has been voting opposed repeatedly, and he got very lucky with leadership roulette last year and the year before, and got his complaints about 10 lies 6 of the current apostles have told, all the way up to
Yeah.
the office of the first presidency, with a bit of shepherding through strategic emails to their secretary, and a commitment from Dallin Oaks to investigate them, which he never did. You know, he just said, "Oh, Fair Mormon thinks I didn't lie about my very obviously provable lie. Now shut up." You know, to his state president, basically.
That's right. Because of
So,
you and Nemo,
mm,
Maven voted opposed, and I voted opposed.
hey,
Just to the
oh,
Q15, not to our local leaders.
yes, that's it.
And
Hmm.
No, absolutely, yeah,
I
which is
support the
what Nemo
local leaders.
does. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, you can do that. So that really is my point. So John Jolin was like, "Come on, Mormon stories, tell your story," but your stuff is even more long form than my long form. People may not have heard of you. I want to give you a big audience. He'd already offered to just take all my episodes wholesale and release them as Mormon Stories episodes, which was incredibly generous of him. You know, what a guy. And he's very much about a rising tide raises all boats. He's not competitive at all. And but so he then said, could you maybe make an episode just that summarizes your points, but could you film it? Here we are 5 years later. And I've still not made Mormon Stories the movie, but I've got the script. I've got a million voice recordings of it. And what I did do is I started filming my episodes to get used to it. So thank you, John. This is all your fault. And so I started, you know, bought the kit, got the cameras. Doug Vincent, who's our little guardian angel out there and often helps people with kit, he bought the camera we are looking at now. Um, and um, and you know, we've all gradually raised our game with slightly more professional kit. I'm still sitting in my living room, obviously. Um, and it's really taken off. So first as an audio podcast, starting to get, you know, 2 or 3,000 listeners per episode, then the same being matched on YouTube. And my content tends to be way too long because there's just so much to say, or it's as long as it needs to be, because it's about the long form. It's not about just reacting to events. It's about larger analysis. Um, And
You leave
it's
no
and what's been really
stone
gratifying.
unturned.
And I think, as RFM said quite early on, what's cool about what you do, which is in effect what he does as well, of course, is you say the apostles are saying this stuff, and then you play them saying it. You know, here's the proof. This is the documentary, because we've all learned how quickly things get thrown down the memory hole. So what I'm trying to do as I go is, I'm a teacher, so it's about education. It's offering the evidence and the proof. It's in a sense creating an archive to stay on the record of, here is the clip from this talk that they've now erased from the internet. Here is the audio. Here's what was said. Here's screenshot from this website. It was real. I'm not just making this up. You can look at it, pause and read if you want to. So in a way, it's about documenting history. It's about investigative journalism. It's about analysis. But ultimately, what are the problems? Who caused them? And can we fix it? And out of the fog of going down so many rabbit holes, it really feels like there is a clear answer, actually. And thank goodness it's a very simple answer. And even more, thank goodness, you don't have to add anything to standard Mormonism to do it, which is a huge relief. Because normally dissidents and critics of the church are seen as having an alternate agenda. Like in the language of Ward Radio and so on, we're all Marxists who are trying to get Mitt Romney and the Democrats to infiltrate the church and ruin everyone's marriages and take away their guns and crap, you know. So I just, perhaps more than any other dissident podcast, so I keep going back to the scriptures over and over again. The answers are all there. The Doctrine and Covenants says that everything should be done by common consent. Doctrine and Covenants 107 names several ways that the church leader can be disciplined. Any bishop can convene a council of 12 high priests to put on trial the president of the church. And it says specifically, because he is not above the law, he is no more protected in a sense than any other member from accountability. And this wonderful, for most of my life, the Doctrine and Covenants Institute manual about Section 26, about common consent, has had this amazing paragraph, which basically says that there should be common consent votes about everything that impacts the lives of the saints, not just who leaders are, but scripture, policy, doctrine, or anything that impacts the lives of the saints. I'd say it's not quoting anyone, it's just there. But it's been there for decades until the most recent, reincarnation of Institute. If you Google common consent, LDS, it's the first thing that comes up still.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. And that for me is the great answer. And that's what I'm covering in a kind of take back control mini series that I'm working through at the moment, is to kind of recap the whole journey and where do we go with it. We can replace these people. We don't have
Yeah.
to keep sacrificing literally millions of church members because we're pandering some geriatric old control freaks who should never have been in there in the first place, and who haven't been held accountable at all.
Yeah, if you think about
All you
it,
have to do is vote opposed. It's so simple.
if you think about it, Joseph Smith, his early years were in the infancy of the democratic formation of the 13 colonies into 13 states and the growth of the United States. And people were enamored with that, right? It was a new look for governing. And Joseph Smith instilled, he was taught all those principles. He instilled them in the church, and they have been abandoned, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I would say, as a Brit, new look my arse. We did this in the Middle Ages. I'm sorry, democracy is not new. It's
just
new
saying,
to you. But we've, apart from, not letting you have the vote over the tea, sorry about that. But the idea of democracy has been there for quite a while already. But also it's throughout our scriptures. The Pearl of Great Price teaches that God ran the pre-existence as a democracy. The war in heaven wasn't people firing BB guns at each other. It was a debate. And then people voted. And 2/3 voted for the correct plan, or is it? Then the Book of Mormon teaches democracy is God's preferred form of secular government. It's a transition from monarchy to democracy with all its messiness, but it still says this is better. And then you have the Doctrine and Covenants very clearly in several sections the church has a written constitution. We are a democracy. And you keep hearing people being defensive about, no, we're not, it's a theocracy, God reveals. Well, in a democracy, parties propose candidates, but you still vote. And that's what the revelation process, the leaders of the church can say, we think this person should be your bishop, discuss and vote. It's both, and
Pray and get your
and
own.
that's a
Yeah.
dangerous, and that's an incredibly dangerous idea. It's unfortunately for them, it's in our scriptures, and it's the idea that the church was run on until, Brigham Young very early on did the coup d'etat of the 12 apostles, which was his quorum to be his power base.
Mhm.
But it's all there, and they know it. I think they're terrified, and very intentionally over the last few years, the whole rhetoric around voting has changed from you are holding leaders accountable to you are holding yourself accountable to be loyal to the leaders. Your vote to
Right.
sustain them is an unconditional loyalty vote, which is incredibly sinister. Whatever they do or say thereafter, you can't get rid of them. You've already promised to do what they tell you. And they've literally taught that in general conference. And that's the new narrative, including in the teaching manuals about common consent. They've now removed any consideration or mention of voting in common consent from the Institute manuals that have anything to do with anything other than voting or confirming the decision of God through his
Yeah.
priesthood to appoint
And that's in
someone
spite of
to a
the
calling.
harm that they cause. I've seen many members of the church,
Yeah.
including Brian Hales, when we did an episode together.
Mm,
And in that episode there, Brian Hales himself was saying that even when harm is coming from the church to its members, what he thinks God would want us
mm,
to do is to support the leadership and just let him take care of it. So
I
do
know.
nothing. Do nothing when you see harm happening. It's this obedience and loyalty to leaders that is above
Yeah.
all, no matter what they do.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
gospel of obedience
And that
now.
Yeah, it is, and the covenant path, and this is in a sense the final steps of the Pharisee takeover of the church. This is them finally consolidating their power. They've brainwashed a whole generation with McConkie Mormonism through Joseph F. Smith and Fielding Smith's books about doctrine, and then Mormon doctrine from Joseph Fielding's son-in-law. And then most of the people I'm at church with haven't read a single thing since. They've not read the Gospel Topics essays. My stake president and bishop and have repeatedly said, what can we do to help you, or to alleviate your concerns? And I've said repeatedly, teach everyone the Gospel Topics essays. Just let the people sat next to me, uncomfortable with what I'm saying or paranoid in church, know I'm actually up to date with the church's own stuff, and they're not. Could you
Well,
please do
besides
that
that,
for the
Peter,
members who know
anything
better?
but that.
Because you're alienating. I know. And it always is. It's, oh, well, we don't have the manpower for it anymore, or it wouldn't, they wouldn't be interested. It's like if you told them to do something, they'd do it because you've created a church of obedient sheep. Tell them it's important, they'll do it. And it's all these excuses. And we've just been saying the same thing, right? And it's exactly what Ballard said, allegedly, said to the whole CES system. And it was in the Ensign years ago. Tell them at church. They need to hear it from you first. So it's all come full circle in a sense to that. And now the Come Follow Me curriculum is so dumbed down. It's just direct that what the episode I'm working on now is fascinating. I'm going back to what the shock jock apologists are saying. Greg Maxson of Quick Media. These two new guys we found in Courageous Convictions, the
Word radio.
Midnight Mormons who became Ward Radio. If you listen long enough, and you have to kind of take your anti-nausea pills and do it in small chunks, because normally they also say horrific, insensitive, callous things about people who've left the church as if we're all satanic monsters and just ridiculous nonsense. But they have these glimmers of truth. So my theory is, and it's not even a theory, it's proven. If you are regularly talking about the issues in the church, even if you are starting from an extreme politically far right, if they want to label themselves that way, but TBM conservative, reactionary, traditionalist mindset, the longer you keep talking about it, the more you'll start to have reality checks. And Hugh B. Brown famously talked about the marketplace of ideas the marketplace of knowledge, that in public and open-minded discussion about issues, truth prevails and you knock off the lies.
Have you seen that?
These
'Cause
people, even in their bubble, are doing that. Go on, sorry.
I know a lot of us have said, "I used to be that way and now I'm not." But I think, I mean, like
Yeah.
myself and most of us, we weren't out publicly podcasting those previous things. I think thankfully for a lot of us, we're thankful that our previous posts or whatever have basically been lost to time. I mean, not truly on the internet, but you know, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So I'm not aware of
Yeah.
anyone as hardcore far right who has come around. I'm curious if you've seen that or
Transitioned.
if this is just
Yes. Nuance ho. Cara Burrell is very
No,
adamant
that's
and
true.
clear
Yeah.
that she used to be absolutely in that space. Yes. And she campaigned for Prop 8, I think, and all the rest of it. So yes, and Bill Reel and John DeLynn, they started off as fair, you know, Bill was working for FAIR. They started off as mainstream apologists. But the
I
more
feel
they
like they're not
talked and
quite
the more they
like Quick
thought it through, they
Media
had to
Jacob
shift.
Hansen level,
No.
but
It's going to
yeah.
take these people longer, but in a sense, it's interestingly, it
You think
started
it'll
to
happen?
happen, and it's going to. Well, it is happening. That's my point, as you'll find out in my next episode,
All
because
right.
I've got all the quotes of them doing it. So it's basically the whole list of criticisms that we're making, that the system of gerontocracy is broken, appointing the oldest people to be leaders, that they're losing the young people, that church is totally boring, that the leaders, the general authorities are giving mixed messages and not being consistent. They're all saying it now. They've all said it. It's beautiful. Wait for the sound bites. It's gorgeous.
So in
They
fits and
have all
starts,
identified the same list of problems.
in
And
fits and starts and
because
bits
they've
and
been
pieces,
talking about,
they've been
yeah,
echoing what you've been saying for the last 4 or 5 years
yeah,
or longer.
yes, yeah. And they don't have the answers yet. So I'm like, come on board. We've already thought this through, chaps. And, you know, but they've identified the same problems. And what is fascinating is we've got this phenomenon now where everyone's abandoning the general authorities. We've already watched as a slow burn, Terrell and Fiona Givens and Patrick Mason, all these sort of very mainstream, you know, academic-y type people. They've all abandoned the leadership. I mean, Patrick Mason said on Mormon Stories that the apostles should just busy themselves with keeping the lights on and doing the admin, and that the trained historians should be the ones doing doctrine in the church. Did he even know those words were coming out of his mouth? But they've so normalized this idea that these people have no idea what they're doing. They don't know the history. These are incompetent old doddering oafs,
Quaker
you know,
did that on the recent
duffers.
Jubilee
Yeah,
episode where
yes,
he's like,
yes,
they're old men, they're in their 90s. And it's just like,
yes,
yeah, but
yeah.
they're prophets, yes
So
or no?
they have just been abandoned by everyone. No one takes them seriously anymore. And even if they're claiming to be totally loyal, you keep listening. They've got all these caveats. You know, I've been taking a deep dive in some of the more extreme ones, and even they, and I mean, it's fascinating. Everyone has realized these leaders are not cutting the mustard. You know, they are not functional. They're clearly not having revelations because they don't even claim to. Well, they talk about it, but where are they? All they've done is tweak meeting schedules and keep eviscerating the endowment. I mean, that's it. There's no big ideas. There's no
That's right.
solution for the catastrophic collapse of membership, and everyone's starting to notice, as I thought they would. So my sort of game plan, in a sense, why am I even bothering, has been, as I keep saying throughout, very simply, is there going to be a moment of epiphany in time? We are on a very tight schedule here. The church will functionally cease to exist in my country in the next 5 years. It will fall below thresholds that it cannot recover from. There will be not enough youth left to convert enough people to rebuild the wards. We've got some amazing missionaries in my ward. They're working their socks off, but nothing has been changed about what caused 80% of all the other converts to leave. So that will just repeat, as I've said to our elders quorum president. So we're on a really tight schedule here. And it's been really painful listening over and over again to even John DeLynn in the past saying the church is here to stay. You're not, you know, Mormonism will always be here, la la la. And over years it will
In some
change. There'll
form or
be a
another.
savior apostle who's woke and it will continue. And you can't really break this machine. But
Right.
now,
Almost
at the
like
last,
saying
in the last year or two,
we've built a Titanic
yeah,
that can't be sunk,
yes,
and we're
that
going to
can't be
sail it.
sunk. Yeah,
We're going to sail it right into
and
an
yeah,
iceberg to prove it.
yeah. But what we've always known here in Britain and in the rest of the world is how fragile the church is. We're not in a world where Mormons run the business and the politics of an actual state. I mean, that's insane. Your little weird bubble in Utah is so not how reality is. We are a tiny, tiny, insignificant, almost unnoted minority in pokey little congregations. Our ward boundaries have literally hundreds of thousands of people in them. And we have failed for years to do more than continue to lose some of our people. You know, we've not had the impact. We've not grown exponentially. We were before the internet. It was starting to happen. We were on the cusp of exponential growth. It could have happened. But you guys screwed it up royally with all the lies and also continuing negligent mismanagement and being totally irrelevant and shutting down all the things that made the church worth participating in. You know,
That's
Nelson's attack on everything cultural and social has been a disaster. He thinks he's simplifying by killing it and having
That's
nothing
right.
Taking the
left.
soul
That's
out of
much
it.
simpler. As
And
his brain cells die, he doesn't have to think about so much, you know.
to our audience, if you're
It's really
excited
sad.
about all the things that Peter's saying, you can go to check out his Mormon Civil War YouTube channel and see all the things that he's done. And, you know, we're so grateful to have you, Peter, today. And Maven,
Oh,
you
you're
have any
very
other
welcome.
things?
No, I'm excited for your analysis coming up. You really got me hooked with that one. I want to see those clips and hear them. And
It's
I'm just grateful that you
fascinating.
went through all of them so
Yeah.
that I don't have to listen to all of those guys.
Oh,
So
honestly,
yeah,
I took the hit. But this is the moment. This year is going to be amazing because even the most intense shock jocks and the fact that the church is now actually starting to liberalize regarding LGBTQ people, appointing an ally as president newsroom, baptizing transgender people, allowing Charlie Bird and his husband to have a calling in the sacrament. They are freaking out, and now they're starting to experience what we've been experiencing for years in our relationship with the leadership, and it's going to be a game changer. We are suddenly going to have some very interesting allies when it comes to voting opposed to the leaders.
Very
It's
historic
all happening.
time we're living in
Yeah,
right now. And so we'd
it
like to
is.
thank
This could be
everyone.
it. Yeah.
Everyone for listening, and check out. We're probably gonna have the most links in a description of a podcast ever because of all the things we've talked about here. And like to invite everybody, like I say, to see the Mormon Civil War, see Peter's epic podcast, Visit with John DeLynn on Mormon Stories, and Maven,
Which hasn't happened yet, but one day.
Right, but you
I
made
need to do my movie.
You've made a couple of appearances, and we're going to include those. And you and Maven have gone over some things that we'll also have a link about. Was that the Michelle Stone and
Ryan
polygamy
Hales.
wars?
Ryan
Brilliant.
Hales?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sort of a tip that happened. And so, you know, everyone, this is an exciting time. We're glad to have you all watching. Please like and subscribe and share. And, you know, we hope that everyone has, you know, a good rest of the week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.